downloaded a patch to your optics so you can access our security system. It's set up so that I can't just let someone who isn't DedSec in. You'll have to do the manual override.
I'm impressed. I took DedSec to be a group of pranksters, but sounds like at least one of you had some sense.
One of Sabine's, are you? I'll see you downstairs later then.
I'm not trying to be funny. Maybe I'm wrong altogether, but a mate of mine said something about migrants hiding in streets. Must be some people saying, oh, good seeing you. Now that I say it out loud, you walk away from it, really think about it. And that film, oh, it's sad. Better not be true.
There we are. Christ, it's dark. Better get the power back on.
Coming up in today's episode of The Upload, we're talking about how Bagley managed to conquer
This is the Bug. Hello, Resistors, it's Bug time. Are you all sitting comfortably? No? Good. That's as it should be. This is the Bug. I'm Andy, and joining me to analyse the latest blowflies to emerge from the corpse of a once free Britain, it's Alice.
Hello, Andy.
And today, we're going to talk to you about Albion, your friends and mine. Alice, the government has extended Albion's contract, and have also boasted that violent crime has plummeted to a record low. Now, extending Albion's contract, to me, that's like having a pet dog, let's call it Nigel for the sake of argument, that attacks you every single day and thinking to yourself, wouldn't it be nice if Nigel had puppies?
That contract has been extended so many times, it's like the neck of a politician that's criticised the government.
I'm not sure entirely how those contract extension negotiations went, probably like a footballer. In the old days, I assume Albion's agent was leaking stories to the press about how our favourite private militia was being tapped up by Barcelona or Bayern Munich. The government panics and thinks, well, we better get them signed up before it's too late. But still, violent crime, a record low, although I imagine that probably depends exactly how you count it. If you include violent crime committed by the state, either themselves or via Albion, their chosen violent crime contractors who provide such a very valuable bargain service of beating people up, well, it's probably not quite as low as the figures suggest.
I don't know. I think they're probably right. Who has the opportunity to commit violent crime these days anyway? The moment you pick up a fruit knife, you get tasered by a robot policeman and deported for looking Bulgarian. It's a much more peaceful society. It's just much less of a society.
I want to know the details of the contracts, Alice. I mean, are they paid per dissident duffed up? Is it a set rate for each extrajudicial state mugging? And what is that rate? What do you think?
Well, they certainly look like they're trying to hit a quota of some kind.
Well, what is the set rate? Is it 99.95 cryptos bargain? Seems very reasonable indeed. I imagine they don't ask too much anyway, because it's just so nice to get paid for doing your hobby anyway, isn't it? I imagine it doesn't even feel like work.
I mean, who needs violent crime anymore anyway? You know, you can just starve to death without even starting a gang war.
We do have to ask exactly what does the Prime Minister make of all this. Let's ask him. Oh, I hope they pick up. Hello, you're through to number 10 Downing Street. Hello, is the Prime Minister there, please? Let me just check. Jack? Sorry, you've missed him. I'm afraid he's popped out for the decade. Oh, never mind. Is there anyone else I can talk to? Yes, of course. There's a shady cabal of vested interests who control him and prop him up in power. Great, I'll have a chat with them then.
Oh, Andy, remember when you could get away with prank calls without people coming around to your house to beat the shit out of you?
Oh, happy time.
You're listening to The Bug.
Do you think the Prime Minister will ever come back?
I don't think we've ever had a Prime Minister.
Well, that's a much more reassuring way of looking at things. What have we become? Alice, when you look at the state of our politics, we're supposed to have the mother of parliaments. Well, this is one mother that has emphatically abandoned her kids in the woods to be brought up by wolves. And let me tell you, that never works out like it does in the stories. Wolves are bad parents, unless you're a wolf, in which case they can do a job bringing you up as a wolf. Do not give your children to wolves. And do we actually own anything as a country now? Is there anything we haven't flogged off for profit? Oh, I think we've basically just become a homeopathic Britain. Diluted and diluted until there's barely a trace of the original Britain left. But some quackish lunatics insist it actually works better that way. It's total bullshit. Is there anything left? New on The Bug this week, a new feature, the Bug Off feature. The person who has most irritated us in Britain this week, we're going to tell to bug off, and to get things going, I'm going to nominate Big Nigel Castle. This is Britain. History tells us this place is a bastion of freedom. I'm just not sure that kind of freedom should involve Big Nigel expressing his freedom to run a private army. I guess, historically, there is a precedent. The East India Company. That was a trading house with an army of 250,000 soldiers, which is a lot for a company. The Bug PLC has Alice with a water pistol. But, crucially, compared with Albion, the East India Company didn't operate its 250,000-strong army in London. It did it a long way away, out of sight, out of mind. Anyone to nominate for the Bug Off, Alice?
I think today's Bug Off for me goes to my streaming service. I'm sick of being recommended things based on things I already like. The other day it recommended me to watch a reality TV competitive dating show set in a nude commune. Andy, I watched it and I liked it, and I do not want to be the kind of person who enjoys nude competitive reality television dating shows. I did not want to know that about myself. I have to go sit in the corner and cry.
That's it from The Bug. Don't forget the live show that is so secret it is definitely not happening at the usual time and place this month. Definitely not. And definitely do not tell anyone not to come to it. It's definitely not happening. Usual time and place. Bye-bye.
I'm Claire Waters, and we've been discussing the hacktivist, now alleged terrorist group, DedSec, on this week's Buccaneer Radio. I have Colin calling in. Colin, what's your take?
Now, I've been saying from the start we should have rounded up DedSec and thrown them in jail.
What have we got here?
Hello and welcome back to The Upload. In this episode, we're talking about CTOS 3.0, the city operating system that's now powering all of London. For those of you who need reminding, as if anyone does at this point, CTOS was first used in Chicago in 2014 and then San Francisco in 2017 before coming here to London. And every time it's been rolled out, it's been pretty much an unmitigated disaster.
For those of you who are listening who are lucky enough not to be here in London's chaotic scenes, it's worth remembering that the telecoms tower is now owned by Bloom. The tower looms over northwest London. It's always been a communications hub, acting as part of the UK's television and communications network, although there's been some secrecy around its use, and now that Bloom owns it, it's only even more secret.
Yeah, now everything that's part of Bloom's city surveillance operation is run through the telecoms tower. And I have to say, it looks completely ridiculous. It's got that silly crown thing at the top and all the blue light.
What's that even about? What does it do? I don't see that there's any purpose to that at all.
It's a blight on the skyline, if you ask me. And it's become the main point of control for millions of people. The System Network and Bagley are both operated and streamed from there too.
And don't forget about the self-driving cars too.
I always thought they were just running on their own.
No, CTOS is the big control system behind the cars. There was a point back in the earliest days of self-driving car technology that they operated by themselves. They used to use a series of sensors to see the world around them. Radar, for instance, would look far off into the distance, while LiDAR would detect objects nearby. And while these cars still use some of this technology, Bloom's CTOS and its detailed maps and data that it has on London really makes Bloom be able to take control of it. And CTOS can take control of your car if you're parked incorrectly. It's no surprise that it was made mandatory to have a self-driving car.
The system is so bad, though. It's so annoying. Whenever I try to use one of the shareable self-driving cars, I always find myself stuck in traffic jams or roadblocks. Not to mention the accidents. I've heard so many stories of cars shunting into the back of others. I think they're worse than human drivers sometimes.
The technology was meant to make things better, but Bloom has made it so bad that it just makes London even more chaotic than it was before. I'm giving up on the cars. I'm only using the bikes, which are not self-driving at the moment, at least. And don't even get me started on the data. Everything that Bloom sees from your movements around the city and the self-driving cars is collected and feeds back into its big information control system.
Oh, not you and Bloom and privacy again. You're a broken record.
Not as broken as our city's cars.
This is London Calling. You're listening to Buccaneer, your pirate podcast source for what they don't want you to know. I'm Tash, and this time we're giving a special shout out from us to the boys and girls at the Signal and Intelligence Response Service, better known as SIRS. Why not? They're going to be listening anyway. They're listening to everything. They probably know that you're listening to this show right now. But don't worry, we're not going to say anything bad about a massive, unaccountable spy organization that uses its powers to stifle dissent and shut down free speech. Instead, we're going to look at how SIRS became so powerful. And as usual, we'll keep everyone's names and locations secret, so SIRS doesn't come looking for them. Charles is an expert in the dark arts of surveillance who worked to set up democratic media in post-communist states. How did it go so wrong in Britain?
You know, we're looking at all the wrong things when we look at Britain's crisis. There's a lot of concentration on data and how that's been used and manipulated. And what we haven't looked at is the power structures and the profit that lies behind this. For example, if we examine what actually happened, you know, there's a company that's really very interested in selling passports and making it easy to provide visas for investment and so on. And historically, throughout the world, they've been working with this big data manipulation company in order to overthrow governments. And then suddenly all the chickens came home to roost. Nobody could find any receipts for what was paid for. Nobody could figure out how things were done, but everybody had a feeling that something really stunk and they couldn't figure it out. And yet it was standing there in their face the whole time. There's a couple of different ways that we got where it is that we are. I mean, one, you have a lot of smaller organizations, smaller power groups, companies as well, who are bending things just a little. Oh, we'll compromise a little bit. We'll bend the rules a little bit. And and try to achieve what it is that we hope to achieve that's good for us. And if you add all of that up, what you end up with is a big wall moving in a big way from a lot of little buttons being pushed. But also there's this other thing that's going on here is the gathering of data and the analysis of data has authoritarianism contained within its DNA. It is by its nature a tool for authoritarianism, and it has been used in that way.
How does big data look into our lives? James covered it for the pre-crisis press.
We're starting to see the merger of private data and that with data held by the state into what are called social credit systems. This is where every aspect of your behaviour is monitored and totted up by a central system to sort of score you as a person, a bit like a credit card, but predicated on all of your behaviour rather than just the money you're spending. And this can have profound impact. We're starting to see systems emerge which will punish you and stop you from doing things in society based on your behaviours, and this can be as trivial as if you jaywalk, if you cross the road in the wrong place, you might lose points. If you do some community activities or help your neighbours, you might earn points, and then this can be used to sort of evaluate you as a person. And this could mean, for example, the travel privileges, being able to travel first class, or being denied from travelling first class to not being allowed to travel at all. These systems are very real and very possible because of all of the data that is now held on us.
Ian was a veteran political writer and podcaster back in the days of pre-crisis Britain.
Is the world we're living in now fascist? Well, this is what fascism is. It is the complete and total control of the individual. The desire to basically say to the individual, nothing in your life matters. On an individual basis, you are now part of the whole, part of the nation. And the only meaning that you will find in your life is to become part of the nation. What is a nation? A nation doesn't mean anything, right? The nation is basically just encapsulated by the leader that takes over, that claims that he, has this sort of access to the soul of the country, to the soul of the people. He never does. It's just a myth. But that's what they go for. And on that basis, they take the right to control every aspect of your life, from who you talk to where you eat, to where you go to hang out with your friends. And what we're seeing now is a contemporary iteration of this process where you get corporations and the state operating in tandem, basically molded into one another. But that isn't that rare. I mean, you saw exactly the same thing in Nazi Germany. You look at the concentration camps that operated in Nazi Germany, there were private companies in those camps making use of that slave labor. Fascism often works with corporations, and it's doing the same now. That's the way in which they track what you do. That's the way in which they track who you talk to. They operate as each other's proxies.
So if your ears are burning and you think someone might be watching you, you're probably right. They're watching all of us. I'm Tash, and you've been listening to Buccaneer. Keep listening, keep sharing the show, and keep it encrypted. They're watching us, but we're watching them too. This is London Calling. You're here with me, Tash, on Buccaneer, your source for what they don't want you to know. In today's world, we've all had to get used to our every move being tracked by the optic on our temples, by the cameras around us, and with every click we make online. Seems like everything we do feeds the big data beast. Why are data giants like Bloom so hungry to get hold of our private information and our metadata? What are they using it for? Will we ever have real private lives again? What is privacy in the digital world? And what happens when capitalism and surveillance become one? As you know, we keep all names confidential on Buccaneer. Speaking from a secure location, here's new technology strategist Charles, who worked all over the world trying to keep democracy strong in the face of the data assault.
If you have enough personal data on somebody, you're able to predict what it is that they're going to do. You can tell what they might be passionate about, but mostly you can tell what they fear. And if you can tell what someone fears, then you can manipulate them and you can move them in particular directions. Like, data is collected on citizens in every possible way. Data is collected through surveillance cameras. Data is collected from television sets. Data is collected from voter records. It's collected from how much power do you use in your house and how much water do you use in your house. In pre-crisis Britain, we got really used to all of our services being free. Everything suddenly became free that was digital. But what people forgot is that if you're not paying for it, then you're the product being sold.
If technology brings out the worst in capitalism, capitalism brings out the worst in technology. Senior academic Alfie tells us how big business repurposes big data.
Historically, what's happened, of course, is that people have traded their privacy for their convenience as smartphones and other kinds of technology came in and became mass-consumed, mass-used items and technological objects. Gradually, people were so attracted to the affordances of these technologies that privacy kind of retreated into the background and into a state we've got now where it's essentially gone. Having this access to this data makes huge tech companies like Bloom so much more powerful than they would be otherwise. And not just in the obvious ways. Of course, there's a lot of worry and fear over what they can do with the data, can track anyone, find anyone, see what every individual is doing at any point in time. But I think there's even deeper reasons why this data empowers these huge companies to control our society and make us do things. So lots of predictive technologies which are implemented by these tech giants. It's not only interested in knowing what we're going to do, but influencing the patterns of our movement. So technologies might suggest routes to use in the city, places to go, restaurants to go to, cafes to go to, music to listen to. And these suggestions are not just predicting what we might like to do, they're actually influencing the way citizens move, think, eat, meet, and use their city as a space. So London has become a place where a small group of surveillance capitalist companies like Bloom can control the movements of individuals and orchestrate the way they move around their city and the way they essentially live, the things they do, the things they enjoy and the life they lead. So we're really kind of outsourcing our decision making, I would say, to a huge corporate capitalist company, and there's something very, very scary about that indeed. All these technologies can be used to not only influence us to act as the perfect consumer, but also to prevent us from doing radical and revolutionary things. So technologies in foreign nations that have been used are things like heat map features which show where populations are gathering. In-game rewards can be offered to people to take different routes, things like that. Traffic data can be manipulated to prevent people gathering and protesting, as has happened in some of the authoritarian regimes across the world recently. So what we're looking at is not only a set of technologies which make people behave as ideal consumers, but ones which actually can be put to use to prevent radical and disruptive behaviour in the city, which limits the power of any kind of revolutionary force.
So, if you thought you had a private life, get used to it. You don't. And we're not going to reclaim our lives without a fight. I'm Tash, and you've been listening to Buccaneer, keeping the resistance informed. Keep listening, keep fighting, and remember, nobody owns you but you.
And welcome to today's episode of The Upload. We're talking about the optic and how it's changed our lives. Now, as you remember, Bloom announced a new version of the optic at the recent Tone conference, but we haven't heard too much about that since due to the dramatic events there. Let's cast our minds back and consider the technology. I mean, the optic changed everything. It lets you see things in AR. You no longer need a smartphone. You just have the small implant that sends signals to your optic nerve and lets you see your emails, take calls, and browse the internet directly as if the screen was in front of your eyes. Instead of having to carry around a phone, you've just got the small handheld unit. So much lighter and so much more convenient. It's great.
Vicky, you sound like you absolutely love the optic. Do you actually think that it's made our lives any better?
I mean, sure, it's definitely made things a lot easier. It's so simple to call someone now. All you have to do is choose who you want to chat to, and they're there, ready to talk. And browsing the web is so much easier. I remember when you used to have to sit down at a computer with an actual keyboard and mouse and type everything out. And my favourite feature is public transport. With the Optic, you can just walk straight onto the tube. It even acts as a passport. No longer do I have to dig around and try and find my old paper passport just to travel somewhere. Also, I thought that Optic's marketing strategy, making it free for people, was a stroke of genius.
Genius. Bloom was really calculated when it was doing that. It was pushing this draconian device on us at all. Sure, everybody flocked to it. There was free Wi-Fi and phone plans. That definitely helped, but it wasn't a case of this is a product that you need in your life.
Why do you hate it so much?
It's just the worst because you had to give up your privacy expectations and accept surveillance. It was almost like the government and Bloom didn't even need to make the Optic mandatory. Making it mandatory was only to get the last holdouts across the line. If free data didn't convince you, fines and arrests from the state for not having the Optic would pretty much be enough.
I mean, what do you mean by privacy problems? No one really talks about that anymore.
They don't talk about it because we don't have any choice when it comes to the Optic. Yes, it's convenient and mandatory, but everybody's forgotten what it really means. Here, you've got a whole company owning basically all the data about your life. Bloom can see everything that you can see. Nothing is private anymore. There are so many times when I don't want anyone to have a clue about where I am, who I'm chatting with, what I'm doing. It's not even dodgy stuff, but I just don't want anybody to blackmail me with this in the future by hacking it. And because of Bloom's contracts with the government, it isn't just Bloom that can see everything I do, it's the government. The UK as a state has become a complete surveillance paradise.
I think you're painting a bit of a bleak picture. It's not all that bad.
No, you're completely wrong on this. I don't want everybody tracking me wherever I'm going around London.
Well, in that case, you might be interested in some rumours I heard. Did you hear that some DedSec hackers have found a way to bypass the Optic's connection with Bloom?
Are they actually making it better or usable or actually friendly for anybody?
Well, word on the street is that they've been able to create an encrypted signal, which means that your world might have a chance of becoming a bit more private again, so you could go back and enjoy all the great things about Optic without that fear of surveillance.
With the Optic, privacy's dead.